It has finally happened. The line in the sand has been drawn, and if you live in the United States and own a personal computer, the clock is ticking down to a moment that will change your digital life forever. Microsoft has officially set a course that makes switching to Linux not just a suggestion for tech enthusiasts, but a mandatory survival move for every American PC user by the year 2027. We aren't talking about a simple software update or a new version of the Start menu. We are talking about the complete federalization of the Windows operating system under new compliance mandates that effectively turn your home computer into a state-monitored terminal. If you think that sounds like an exaggeration, you haven't been paying attention to the recent filings and the silent shifts in Windows 11's architecture. By 2027, the traditional, private, offline PC as we know it will be against the terms of service, and for many, it will be technically impossible to maintain under the Windows banner. The transition began quietly with the push for cloud integration, but the recent announcement regarding the mandatory Cloud Trust architecture for all US-based Windows installations is the final straw. Microsoft is moving toward a system where the operating system no longer lives entirely on your hard drive. Instead, it exists as a hybrid entity that requires constant, real-time verification from centralized servers to even boot the kernel. They are calling it enhanced security for the modern era, but for anyone who values local control, it is a digital occupation. If you want to keep your privacy, if you want to keep your ownership of your hardware, and if you want to ensure your computer works when the internet goes out, you have until 2027 to migrate to Linux. This is no longer a drill. This is the new reality of personal computing. Why is this happening now, and why is it focused so heavily on the American market? It comes down to a convergence of new data retention laws and Microsoft's aggressive push for a total subscription-based economy. For years, Microsoft has been trying to figure out how to stop people from using old, insecure versions of Windows for a decade at a time. Their solution is to move the core of the OS to the cloud, where they can control the versioning, the ads, and the data harvesting with absolute authority. By 2027, every American Windows license will be tied to a mandatory Microsoft ID that is verified against federal identity standards. The local account, that last bastion of privacy, is being phased out entirely. If you aren't logged in, your PC is essentially a paperweight. This is where Linux comes into play. For decades, Linux was seen as the complicated alternative for people who like to spend their weekends staring at a terminal window. But the landscape has shifted. While Microsoft has been building walls, the Linux community has been building bridges. Systems like Linux Mint, Pop! OS, and the modern versions of Fedora have become so user-friendly that the average person can switch in an afternoon without losing their favorite apps or their workflow. The irony is that the very move Microsoft is making to secure their platform is the exact thing driving the largest exodus in computing history. When the choice is between a computer that spies on you and a computer that serves you, the decision becomes very simple, very fast. Let's look at the hardware implications, because this is where it gets truly restrictive. Microsoft is working closely with chip manufacturers to implement Pluton security processors that are hard-coded to trust only Microsoft-signed code at the deepest level. By 2027, new PCs sold in the US will feature hardware-level locks that make it increasingly difficult to install a third-party operating system. However, the current generation of hardware, the stuff you are likely using right now, still has the capability to run whatever you want. This makes the next 2 years a critical window of opportunity. If you don't establish your Linux setup on your current machines, you might find yourself in 2027 trying to buy a new laptop, only to find that every single one is locked into the Microsoft Cloud Trust ecosystem. We have to talk about the recall feature and its evolution. We already saw the backlash when Microsoft tried to introduce a tool that takes a screenshot of your activity every few seconds. They told us they would make it opt-in, but the 2027 roadmap suggests that for American users, these types of AI-driven telemetry features will become mandatory for national cybersecurity compliance. This means the OS will be legally required to monitor for suspicious activity, which is a broad term that can be interpreted in 1,000 different ways. Your computer will essentially be a witness against you in its own home. Linux, by contrast, has no such masters. There is no corporate headquarters in Redmond deciding that your desktop needs to record your every move. The code is open, the community is global, and the priority is the user's freedom. For gamers, the Linux switch used to be the ultimate deal breaker. You couldn't play your favorite titles because of anti-cheat software and DirectX limitations. But that wall has crumbled. Thanks to Valve and the Steam Deck, nearly every major title now runs on Linux with performance that often rivals or exceeds Windows. The compatibility layers have become so advanced that the OS underneath doesn't matter to the game anymore. In fact, many gamers are moving to Linux right now just to escape the bloatware and background processes that Windows 11 forces on them, which can steal precious frames per second during intense gameplay. By 2027, the idea that you need Windows for gaming will be a relic of the past. The mental shift is perhaps the hardest part for most Americans. We grew up with Windows. It's what we used in school, it's what we use at the office, and it's what we've seen in every movie for 30 years. There is a deep-seated muscle memory there. But we have to realize that the Windows of today is not the Windows of 1995 or even 2010. It has transformed from a tool into a service, and from a service into a surveillance platform. The switch to Linux isn't just about changing your desktop wallpaper, it's about reclaiming your digital sovereignty. It's about deciding that you are the one who decides when your computer updates, what software it runs, and who has access to your files. Think about the sheer amount of bloatware currently infesting a fresh Windows installation. You pay $1,000 for a machine, and the first thing you see are ads for Candy Crush, TikTok, and a dozen different subscription services you never asked for. This isn't an accident, it's a business model. Microsoft doesn't view you as a customer who bought a product. They view you as a user to be monetized. In 2027, this monetization will reach its peak, with advertisements likely integrated directly into the File Explorer and the AI Assistant. Linux, on the other hand, is clean. When you install a professional distribution, you get exactly what you need and nothing more. No trackers, no pop-ups, and no suggested content cluttering your workspace. One of the biggest concerns for the average user is the app gap. What about Word? What about Excel? What about Photoshop? The truth is that we have entered the age of the web app and the cross-platform container. Almost everything you do in a browser works identically on Linux. For the heavy hitters like the Adobe Suite and specialized CAD software, there are now extremely powerful alternatives that have matured to a professional level. But even better, the rise of virtualization and bottles on Linux allows you to run many Windows apps in an isolated environment, with almost zero performance loss. The gap is now more of a small crack that most people can step over without even noticing. The 2027 deadline is also tied to the end of extended support for older, more open versions of Windows. Once that support vanishes, the only way to stay on a secure Windows platform will be to accept the new Cloud Trust mandates. This is a classic pincer movement. They are cutting off the old ways while narrowing the path for the new way. This is why we say the switch is becoming mandatory. If you want a secure, supported, and functional computer that isn't a privacy nightmare, Windows will no longer be an option for you by the end of 2027. The road leads to Linux, whether you like it or not, so why not start the journey on your own terms? Let's address the technical side of the migration. Many people think they will lose their data or break their hardware if they try to switch. The reality is that modern Linux installers are often easier to use than the Windows installer. They handle the partitioning, the drivers, and the setup with a level of automation that is honestly impressive. You can even live boot Linux from a thumb drive to try it out on your specific hardware without touching a single file on your hard drive. This allows you to verify that your Wi-Fi works, your printer is recognized, and your favorite sites load correctly before you ever commit to the change. This is the ultimate try before you buy, except the product is free. The concept of user choice is becoming a revolutionary act in the American tech landscape. We have become so used to the duopoly of Apple and Microsoft that we've forgotten that computing was once a wild, diverse field. By switching to Linux, you are participating in a global movement to decentralize power. Every person who moves away from the mandatory Cloud Trust system makes that system less powerful. It's a vote for an open internet and open standards. As we approach 2027, this choice will become a significant point of friction between users who want liberty and corporations that want total predictability and control. What happens to the millions of older PCs that won't meet the 2027 Cloud Trust hardware requirements? Under Microsoft's plan, these machines would become obsolete, adding to the growing mountain of electronic waste. But Linux is famous for breathing new life into old hardware. A laptop that feels sluggish and tired on Windows 11 will often fly on a lightweight Linux distribution like XFCE or Mate. By refusing to follow the mandatory migration to the new Windows, You are also making a stand for sustainability. You are saying that your hardware is yours to keep and use for as long as it physically functions, not until a software company decides it's time for you to buy a new one. We also need to consider the impact on privacy in the professional world. If you are a freelancer, a journalist, or a developer, your computer often contains sensitive information that belongs to your clients or your sources. Under the 2027 Windows mandates, the level of telemetry and automated security scanning means you can no longer guarantee the privacy of that data. If the OS can see it to secure it, then the OS owner can see it. Linux allows you to implement full disk encryption that you control, with keys that never leave your physical possession. For professionals, the switch to Linux isn't just a preference. It's becoming a requirement for professional ethics and data protection. The 2027 timeline is also strategic because it allows for the full rollout of 5G and 6G infrastructure, which Microsoft views as a prerequisite for their Cloud OS vision. They need you to be always connected so they can always verify your session. If you are a traveler, a van lifer, or someone who simply has an unreliable ISP, the Windows of 2027 will be a constant source of frustration. Linux is built for the user who wants to be offline just as much as they want to be online. It doesn't need to call home just so you can open a text document or edit a photo. This autonomy is priceless in an increasingly hyper-connected world. Let's talk about the Microsoft Store and the closing of the ecosystem. We have seen how Apple controls the iPhone through the App Store, taking a cut of every transaction and deciding what software is allowed. Microsoft is moving in this exact direction. By 2027, the ability to download a random.exe file from the internet and run it will likely be hidden behind layers of warnings or disabled entirely in the name of safety. You will be expected to get your software from the curated, monetized Microsoft Store. Linux, however, uses repositories and Flatpaks, which are managed by the community and the developers themselves. There is no gatekeeper. If you want to run a piece of software, you run it. It's your machine. The transition won't be without its challenges. You'll have to learn where the settings are, and you might have to find a new favorite way to manage your photos. But these are temporary hurdles. The reward is a computer that doesn't treat you like a suspected criminal or a product to be sold. The reward is a system that grows with you, that you can customize to your heart's content, and that remains stable for years without needing a refresh or a total reinstall. Once you experience the stability of a well-configured Linux system, the chaotic, ad-filled world of modern Windows feels like a fever dream you've finally woken up from. As we look toward 2027, we can expect the mainstream media to echo Microsoft's talking points. They will talk about how mandatory cloud trust is a win for everyone and how it will stop all viruses forever. They will paint Linux as a dangerous, unsupported Wild West. But remember who pays for the advertising on those news networks. The truth is found in the code, and the code of Linux is open for everyone to see. There are no hidden backdoors for advertisers or government agencies that hasn't been scrubbed out by thousands of independent developers. That transparency is the only true security in the digital age. The move to Linux is also an investment in your own skills. In a world where AI is automating many basic tasks, understanding how your operating system works is a huge advantage. Learning the basics of the Linux command line gives you a level of power over your technology that most people will never have. It makes you a creator, not just a consumer. Even if you only ever use the graphical desktop, just knowing that you have the power to change anything you want is a massive psychological shift. It removes the fear that an update might break your life, because you are the one who controls the updates. This 2027 mandatory shift is a fork in the road for all American PC users. One path leads to a managed, monitored, and rented digital existence. The other path leads to freedom, privacy, and true ownership. The door is still open, and the tools are better than they have ever been. You don't have to wait until the 2027 deadline to make the jump. In fact, the sooner you start, the more prepared you will be when the lockdown finally hits. Download a distribution today, put it on a USB stick, and just see what the other side looks like. You might be surprised at how much you've been missing. We are entering an era where our personal devices are becoming battlegrounds for our attention and our data. The federal mandates and corporate policies of 2027 are just the next step in a long-running effort to bring the open frontier of the PC into a fenced-in garden. By choosing Linux, you are tearing down the fence. You are declaring that your thoughts, your work, and your time are yours alone. It's a small switch on a screen, but it's a giant leap for your personal liberty. The countdown has begun, and the choice is yours. In the end, technology should empower the individual. It should be a bicycle for the mind, as someone once famously said, but a bicycle that only goes where the manufacturer wants it to go, and only when you've paid your monthly fee, isn't a tool of empowerment. It's a tether. As we look at the landscape of 2027, the only way to keep that bicycle truly free is to move away from the proprietary systems that are closing in around us. Linux is that path to freedom. It's ready for you, and honestly, after seeing what's coming down the pipeline from Microsoft, you should be ready for it too. The American PC is changing, but you don't have to be a victim of that change. You can be the master of it. Take a look at your computer right now. Think about all the memories, the work, and the personal information stored on it. Then ask yourself who you want to be the ultimate guardian of that data. Do you want it to be a corporation that is increasingly beholden to government mandates and advertising revenue? Or do you want it to be you, backed by a global community of developers who believe that privacy is a fundamental human right? The 2027 deadline is not just a date on a calendar. It's a question, and by the time that year arrives, every American will have to answer it. Start preparing your answer today, and make sure it's one that keeps you in the driver's seat of your own digital destiny. The transition is coming. The switch is becoming mandatory for those who value their rights, and the future of computing is open source. Welcome to the revolution.